Okay, tonight we're going to finish the first section of this course, which is looking at, we've been looking at the things that go into complicating parenting, other than just the fact of the children themselves. But all the differences that go into making up individuals, differences of the parents, differences of the children. We're going to kind of finish with that tonight. And then the next 5, I believe, lessons will all build upon what we've done to this point, about 4 lessons, however many's left.
Yeah.
We'll build upon these differences, and what do you do about it? So the first couple things we're going to look at tonight, we had planned to do last week. We got behind. Hopefully we'll catch up tonight. We looked at personality differences and birth order differences, which are 2 of the bigger things that go on in complicating parenting, both between a father and a mother and between different children. Those of you that have raised multiple children know that it's rare for the second child to be very much like the first child. Now, every now and then you're lucky enough to have that.
We weren't.
No, we had 3, and they were 3 totally different personality types.
We still are.
Yeah. And
We were with them this weekend, 2 of the 3, so it's still there, you know? At almost 40, it's still there.
yeah. So what we're going to look at tonight is differences based upon learning style, differences based upon sex, which you should already be expecting that. That's the biggest difference between the father and the mother, is the fact that you have a male and a female. Well, there's a big difference between whether you have a daughter or a son, or you have a set of children where you have both daughters and sons, or they're all daughters or they're all sons. That makes a real difference in how they grow up, how you parent them, and how the whole family operates. Then we're going to look into life cycle and life stages. Because the really irritating thing about parenting is just as you figure it out, they grow into another stage. And it doesn't work anymore. And you have to figure it out again. And then just as you figure it out, they grow into another stage. Okay, those of you with older kids, is that right? Yeah, that's how it is. So we'll give you a little bit of warning on that. But basically, you just have to realize parenting is something you learn as you go, and just as you get it all figured out, they're out of the home. And by the time the grandkids come along, you don't want to do it again. So you just enjoy it.
Amen.
Learning styles. Now, the current conceptualization of learning styles that's most often used in high school and college is the one that I'll go with because it works well for parenting. But there's several different ways of looking at learning style, and that's basically the method by which people learn. Everybody doesn't learn the same way, despite the fact that school tends to be structured the same way for most people. A few people learn the way that school is structured, and the majority of people don't. So if you're one of those lucky ones that learn the way school is structured, you look like a really good student. And if you're not one of those lucky ones, you struggle in school. It makes a difference in parenting also, especially if your learning style is different than one of your children's, because you're going to teach based upon the way you learn. This is what would work for you. So this is what should work for them, right? And sometimes it does, and much of the time it doesn't. So we'll look at 4 basic learning styles. There's what's called the visual learner. They learn best by seeing things. There's the oral learner, the one that learns best by hearing things. Now, a lot of us tend to want to treat all of our kids as if they're oral learners because we're constantly telling them what to do. And roughly 25% of the American population tests out as being an oral learner. The other 75% are not. So telling them what to do doesn't work well for 75% of the population. Showing them what to do works well with about 25% of the population. Then you have those that learn from symbols. They tend to do very well with reading. So maybe if you write out the instructions and give it to them, they might learn well that way. Or find a good book on how to be a good kid, which there are a lot of good books on how to be good kids. So get them to read and give them a lot of books, and they will pick it up that way. And then you have that set of kids, that's about 25% of the population, who are kinesthetic learners. They learn by doing. Those are the kids that tend to go into technical trades. Those are the kids that tend to have the most trouble in school. It has nothing to do with intelligence. None of these have anything to do with intelligence. It has to do with the way the brain is structured, that they best take in information and store it in a way that they can retain it and use it later. So think for a moment, how do you best learn? Think about when you're in school, when a lesson's being presented. Do you learn best from reading about it, from listening to somebody explain it, from seeing a video or a PowerPoint presentation, or from actually hands-on doing something?
Or even a combination of the two. There are combinations as well.
So whichever one you learn best, that pretty well shows you what your learning style is.
So we are failing terribly for you.
Not for 25%.
For 25% of you, we're doing this okay. The rest of you, sorry.
I guess we could bring in some children.
No.
And for the kinesthetic ones, we can show hands-on how to take care of kids.
No. No. No, they
So
all
she's
came in-
obviously not a
See,
kinesthetic learner.
Yes, I am. I'm very much a kinesthetic learner. Those are things you don't need to learn that way. They're all in here because their kids aren't. So they need that break, so no. How many in here think you are a visual learner? You do well visually. You want to see it. Okay? How many of you are an oral learner? Auditory. Let me listen to it. Okay? How many of you are kinesthetic? Hands-on. Because I definitely am. Okay? And the other one, which is symbols, the reading, the taking it in by putting that in front of you. Alan is one of those that if you gave him a manual on how to build a Nissan, he could read it and given the parts, do it. You wouldn't want to even think about what it would look like if I did that. Because I wouldn't understood the first chapter. But he can do that. He's done that to a vehicle of ours. That just amazes me. How do you just read something and then know it like that? That's crazy to me. And yet, I depend on that because once I've tried with my hands, I give him the instructions. He reads them and puts it together. Or he reads it and I'm the one who looks at the pictures and figure out how to do it. Because I'm that hands-on, let me mess with it long enough and I'll figure it out.
Although I will say, in the modern age, with YouTube videos.
Oh, it's the best of all worlds.
Yeah, with YouTube videos, I can read the instructions, and then I look it up on YouTube and watch somebody do it, and then I go pay somebody to do it. Because most of the time, once I see what action, because I can read it, I'm like, oh, I can do that. And then I watch somebody do it, and I'm like, I'm not touching that. So it's saved me, I don't know if it saved me any money, but it saved me a lot of grief and a lot of frustration.
Yes, it does.
So I love YouTube videos.
Okay. How many of you know what your kids' learning styles are? I see some hands, maybe, sort of, kind of, maybe. And if you have more than one, you probably have more than one kind of learning style going on. So, this kind of hits in that, okay, step out of counselor into teacher, but kind of, like I don't know what role I am. When your kids come home from school, and you've given them an appropriate break from being at school, and they're ready to do homework, and you know it's not homework if they walk in the door from school and immediately start their work, because it's still schoolwork. They didn't have any break. They hadn't been home. You got to give them a break. Got to make it home. So when they're home, and they're starting to do their work, do you create an environment that makes it easier for them to actually do their homework? Because if you meet their learning style need in the home, you're not going to be crazy later. You aren't going to be crazy later. Because when you come and they come in the door and they sit down and you say, okay, get your homework, get it done, and you walk away and they are an oral learner, you've just handicapped them. Because what they really would like you to do is read them the instructions. That's it. Just read them the instructions. Then you can go away. But if you hand it to them and they don't, the other thing you can do when they get a little bit older is say, read the instructions out loud to yourself. Because then they hear their own voice out loud saying those words, and that even helps.
And again, for an oral learner, another thing that helps is they do well if they have like music playing, because it stimulates the learning part of the brain. So even, especially if they're having to read and they're not a reading kind of person, have them read while they're listening to music, and it opens the brain up to learning better.
Yeah.
You don't think that's distracting?
Well, it would be for somebody that's not an oral learner.
Maybe I tell Jordan to turn his music off all the time.
Oh.
Well, see,
And he
okay,
tells me it helps him.
see, that's the
But I'm afraid
problem.
it's going to distract him. But he's also the kid who has to come home and immediately start his work, because if he doesn't, his ADD medicine is well worn off before he finishes. So
Okay, now we've got another issue coming in that really doesn't have to do with the learning style as much, except it's another way the brain works. There's a fair number of kids now that are ADHD. They have a brain that processes significantly different than non-ADHD people. For them, they actually need distraction to focus.
so maybe I'll let him turn his music on.
He'll probably do, but I learned,
So can I throw it
Yeah.
on me? Like, you know, I built their house and everything like that. I could not build the house without the radio cranking and everything like that. I couldn't concentrate. When I'm an engineer, I sit there and draw 3D models all day long. I couldn't draw my models without the radio playing in my ears and everything, because
Makes
of
no sense to
what
me.
it does is it just actually breaks up the, I don't know, it's almost like,
Static in your own head?
yeah, yeah. And so whenever you're doing that, it gives me something else to kind of sort of listen to at the same time. And I'm still doing numbers. I'm still doing I'm talking about doing complex things while I'm listening to music. And you know, and I can't understand it, but I know for a fact that my radio broke while I was trying to build my house, and it
There's the
almost went
wonky
bonkers.
corners.
You know, I just couldn't stand it. Somebody
Yeah.
had to actually go buy me a radio to be able to, I gotta listen to it, you know?
I learned first semester freshman year in college that I didn't study the same way as other people. Now, up until I got to college, I really didn't have to study. Well, I probably had to study, but I didn't study. You know, I could get through school without studying. I hit college, all of a sudden I had to study. So I'd go to the library and I'd sit there and I would try to learn stuff, and it didn't work well. And one day I was short on time and I was supposed to meet this study group over in the student center. So I took my study notes, I'm over to the student center a little bit early, sat down, got my math homework done really quick, got my English homework done really quick, study group showed up, we got everything done. I said, boy, it works better here. So from then on, I went to the student center where there's lots of movement, lots of noise. For the rest of my college career, I did all my studying in the student center. Worked great for me. That's my way of learning. And then eventually I learned somewhere in school that I need the music playing. Once Sherry and I were taking the same course, and we had a paper due the next day. And so about 7 o'clock, we sat down to work on this paper. And I've done all of my research, I have all my notes, I'm ready to write the paper. And I sat down at my computer and she sat down at her computer, and I turned on my music and she turned it off. And I sat there for 2 hours and stared at the computer screen. Could not get the first sentence to go, and she finished her paper. And then she went to bed and I turned on my music. And I had a great time over the next several hours writing what I thought was a wonderful paper, because it had a nice loud amount of music going on. I can't write without.
Loud's the other part. See, the thing we have today are earbuds.
Makes life a lot better.
Very good.
So when
Okay.
kids say they need music, let them have it, as long as they make good grades.
There are how many kids want to do their homework in front of the TV? Or in front of a screen of any kind? And that's why. It's the same distraction. They really are doing better if that's their kind of study. And that's what you have to know. Because I'm the quiet, I need no distraction. I need it to be quiet. I don't need there to be anything that could possibly socially persuade me to get up and leave. So it has to be quiet. But I'm also a very hands-on learner. So if I have to write a paper, that's like torture to me. Let me build a model. Please let me do a project, a bulletin board. That's awesome, but write a paper, that's killer. Knowing what helps your kids will help them. Knowing yours and helping them see what theirs is only benefits everybody.
I will say this, on my two little boys though, there's no way in the world I could let them around a video screen because they hypnotize them.
Yeah,
It's
see,
like
that's not.
there's nothing else going on and it's just like they're zombies, you know, and I'm like, okay, well, you can't
So
do
that's
that.
not their learning style, by the
Right.
way.
But they want to do it all day long.
I know they do.
So the takeaway from this, you can start trying to teach them based on what works for you. But if they don't respond well, then start moving through other types of ways of teaching them, of helping them learn, and let them do that which works for them, which may be the opposite of what would work for you.
The last year, I probably shouldn't tell this story, but I'm going to. The last year I taught at CAC. That's been a while. Shockingly, it's been a while. I had 16 students in my room. Quite a few of them on a medication. Because I kind of also had that reputation of being able to handle them. My room didn't look like all the other classrooms. There were places where there was a 4-foot square taped off. And in the middle of that square would be a student and all their belongings. And over here would be a kid standing at his desk. And over here is this girl that very neatly set with everything in order and everything's perfect. But that's the way my room looked because that kid on the floor was productive as long as he stayed in his square and was on that floor. Because he couldn't sit in a chair. And if I were making him sit in that chair all the time, nothing good was going to happen that day. For him or for me. And the kid who stood, same thing. But they couldn't sit because then they were distracted. Then that's like laying all over the floor and, you know. Learning how they learned helped me teach them be better. They also never spent more than about 20 minutes doing anything before we took a break. If you were up at Sylvan Hills, the old Sylvan Hills campus, not the new one, the old Sylvan Hill campus of the church, you might see me with a train of kiddos walking up and down the hall, around through the auditorium, all the way back up. Because I also knew they couldn't sit still forever. Learning how they learn was part of my job. It's part of your job if you're a teacher, right? That you learn how they learn so you can teach them better. You knowing that at home will help too. We'll talk more about that later when we get into school age stuff. There's some tips.
Still want to emphasize, don't try to make them be like you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest problems parents have, they keep wanting the kids to be just like them. They're not mini-me's.
Yeah.
They're them. They're
Right.
their own person, and they're going to grow to be their own person. And the older they get, the less they will be like you. So allow them to be them. Which they may look exactly like you and act totally different.
Or look just like you and act just like you.
Yeah. Now, how many of y'all have children where you have both sons and daughters? Okay, what have you noticed that's different between raising sons and raising daughters?
I can give you a perfect example. You know, we adopted the boys at 6, 8, and 10. Ellie was 4 and Emma was 8. Like, we had toys that they'd had forever. I'm not kidding. 1 week, those boys came in and broke so many things that I was like, Emma's had that since she was like 1 month old. I mean, just like playing. Not trying to destroy, just playing. They were rough, they were, you know, like, I was like, oh, I needed to prepare for this better.
There's a famous study where people were trying to emphasize that the type of toys that small children are allowed to play with shape their play. The study didn't prove that to be so. And one of the famous videos, which you can probably find on YouTube, but from like 1963, 64, somewhere like that, they're filming these little boys, like 18-month-old boys that are turned loose in this little playroom that's set up like you'd play house. And it had all these little dolls sitting in chairs. And little boys walk over and each of them picked up a doll and they hugged it. Then they start hitting each other with it. You know, well, when the girls went in there, they hugged the doll and they took care of the doll and they carried the doll around. And little boys had to hit each other with it. There's just innately a difference between little boys and little girls.
What else?
Well, as they get older, the boy internalizes everything, and you ask them how their day was. It was good,
Fine.
fine. And then the girl wants to tell you. She'll come out and tell you, well, this happened, this happened, this happened. This is the way I feel. Da 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 da. And then that's the biggest difference.
Yeah.
I see right now.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a male-female thing or just a personality trait? Because I have some boys who tell me everything and some who don't, and
Yeah.
one girl who does, and one girl who was everything was fine, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so I have both.
Yeah. Yeah, I personally feel like that's more a personality trait. We tend to lean towards guys are good. Don't want to talk about my emotions, but there are the guys that do, because there are feeling, sensing guys in the spectrum as much as there are the judging and thinking people. And so we have to recognize it as such, but as a tendency, environmentally, we create that within our boys. The boys don't cry, that kind of thing. Yeah, yeah. When we talk about the differences, I mean, we know differences. We know guys process and think differently. There's the extrovert, the introvert, and a guy, just like there is in a girl. And an extroverted guy may still talk all about everything and he's processing how he's going to do something, but he may not talk about his emotions about that. Whereas an extroverted woman, she's going to talk out loud, she's going to process it out loud, and she may cry through the whole thing because she's not afraid to let her emotions go with that too. So that's part of how we're different and how we process things, how we respond to things. As a rule, general, not always, guys are fixers. You've got a problem, they're there to fix it. You don't have a problem, you just want to vent, they don't know what to do with that. Wait, what? I don't have a job. I don't have a job. You need to tell them up front what the job is, okay? Well, that's true as a general statement, even in our young boys. In our younger ones, they quickly get onto that fix it. They don't mind tearing up the toys because they want to figure out how to fix them. And if they break it, then they know there's a problem and they kind of need to fix it. So it's sort of that understanding of how do you talk to them about that. How does a woman talk to her husband? She just needs to vent a little, and he's a fixer. So you got to figure that out. So you also figure out as a mama, the girl, talking to her son, about what's his expectation, how he's gonna be responding to you. And the same thing's true when daddies hear their little girls just talking about their day, and they're gonna fix it. And that girl's like, you're just not listening to me, you don't care.
Go talk to your mama.
Go talk to your mama. That's usually what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Go talk to your mama.
Okay. Mamas, how many of you have only boys? Okay, what has surprised you about boys that you didn't expect?
Rachel particularly, because there were no boys, brothers.
That's true. I mean, I feel like she just said it, but the rough and the need for it, like when they were little and would start the fighting, I stopped it every time because I was scared that someone was going to injure themselves. And then I kind of just realized.
Which they have.
Which they have. But like it was almost like they had to do it. And the more I fought it, the worse it got.
Yeah.
So maybe me letting go of like and letting them be boys.
Be boys.
Yeah.
I
Yes,
grew up
ma'am.
with just me and my sister, so I wasn't used to boys. And I had a girl first and then a boy, so I didn't really know what to expect. But I was really surprised at how sweet and loving little boys can be. I thought I'd have this cuddly little girl that would want to cuddle on me and this kind of rough boy. But he has just been a sweetheart. He's totally changed what I thought having a little boy would be like. Very cuddly and loving.
Aaron?
Oh, well, I had 4 brothers, so really not much.
No shock there.
It shocked me. But I will say, like, I thought when they got a little bit older, because when we grew up, I was the youngest, so mine kind of got older and moved on and did things. I thought when my boys got older, some of the rough would go away, and it's just gotten worse because they're bigger. And they still wrestle, and it doesn't matter where we are, we could still be at the grocery store. They're arm wrestling, they're wrestling, and they're rough, and they break everything. Like, everything is broken. I mean, like our oven, not the handle on the oven is broken. I saw it tonight. It's broken, like it's broken from them yanking it down. So I don't know if I was really surprised so much. I just thought the wrestling might go to the wayside a little bit, but it hasn't. They're real sweet. To me,
Sounds like it.
aside, they wrestle
Oh,
each
they
other,
love
not
each
me.
other too. That's part of their saying they love each other, is that wrestling.
I think I'm like Ashley though. I wasn't expecting them to be so sweet and concerned about my well-being most of the time. Sometimes not, but.
Another thing, and this may be true of if you have boy and girl, but I've always said they're either hot or cold with each other. So as much as they wrestle, they can be, mad as can be, but something happens, they take up for each other like a split second. Like it was like just in them. I'm sticking up for my brother and he's my best friend. So.
Okay, dads, how many of you only have daughters? Okay, several of you. Okay, what surprised you about that? Anything surprise you, unexpected about the way girls are?
Knew it all.
Anything surprise you?
Not so much about how girls are. I can say this because my other half is not here, but I'm surprised at the dynamic between the mother and the daughter and how that plays out sometimes.
And they really hinge on daddy's approval.
Okay, one thing I want to warn you about. This all gets really complicated once the kids hit teenage years. Mamas, you're not going to understand your teenage boys, but their dad will. And dads, you are not going to understand your teenage girls, but their mom will. And their mom will know when something's a problem or something's normal. And the dads will know about the sons when something's a problem or something's normal. So you really have to listen to your mate when the kids hit those teenage years. Otherwise, you're gonna make lots of mistakes with them. And try to fix lots of things that really aren't problems, they're just strange to you.
Girls, I had 5 brothers. I was the 11 before a little sister came along, so I had 5 brothers. And so I thought and acted more like my brothers than I acted like a girl, I think. I mean, I'm definitely a girl, and I definitely can be emotional. But I would get mad if I cried, because I was just gonna make things worse with my brothers. If they saw weakness in me somewhere, you know. And I could wrestle any of them to the ground. Let's just be really clear about that. But when our girls hit that age where other girls' opinions mattered at school or at church, when they discover girls can be mean and girls can be mean. Guys just hit each other and they're on. We're good. Girls know we're spiteful and we say mean things and we try and make me feel better by making you feel worse. And when our girls hit that stage and they would come home and they would seek Alan out because they needed him to comfort them and soothe them and tell them the world was going to be okay. He would start problem solving. Well, did you try this? Well, next time you ought to do this. And then they were like, where's that? That's when he would say, you need to go talk to your mom. When he could understand that what they wanted was a hug, things changed. He was able to relate in a different way, building some of that relationship that's really important.
The solution I had for my girls that they never took up was I wanted to enroll them in martial arts. And I figured if they could defend themselves, they could take on anybody. And they weren't interested. And I never did understand that. And now my granddaughters aren't interested either. Although I think I've talked one of them into judo.
Evie's out there. But that's just so she can throw her brother on the ground instead of him always throwing her. But it has nothing. Because girls don't hit each other. It's not a defense like that.
If they knew how, they might.
Okay. As you need to be aware, there's differences between you and your mate, and so therefore, obviously, kiddos, there's differences. As you look towards those differences, sometimes say that's just the difference between them being a girl and them being a guy. Contrary to modern society, they're still girls and boys. And they still act along those same lines. Because try as you might to make them neutral, gender neutral, they're still going to choose. And they're going to act a certain way. That's the way we're made. Okay. Well,
So, again, it's the same application as to personality, to birth order, to learning styles. You let them be what they are, which may be very different than you. And you have to learn to parent based upon the fact that they're different than you. Now let's look for a moment at the normal stages of the life cycle. Now, most of you have raised children, at least some. Few of you are getting ready to start the great adventure. You find out quickly that there's that first few weeks of life where it's all about keeping them alive and hoping they learn to sleep through the night. And the real marker where they move from those first few weeks into the next few weeks is when they do start sleeping through the night. That's a huge change for you, and it is for them also.
okay, how many of you, be honest, the first time your kids slept all the way through the night, when you woke up and realized you'd actually slept for any length of time, you panicked and ran to see if they were alive? Because that hadn't happened. You know, that's
Yeah.
now
Okay,
you hear that.
that's
okay?
normal.
That's normal. That's normal. The other thing that's really normal is they sleep, they get that habit, and they start sleeping, And then they stop. And then they wake up again in the night. And you're like, what happened? We were sleeping. And babies hit it at different stages.
It's usually when you put them on table food though, because you're messing up their guts. Poor little ones.
Or not, but okay.
Okay, so anybody have to survive colic?
Survive colic? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, when you have a child with colic, it can cause you to go nuts. The key to this, and I really think it might be good for every parent to have a bout with colic with their children, because it helps you be a better parent when you can get past your own personal crazy to focus on this poor little baby with serious stomach cramps who does not understand what's going on, is just screaming for somebody to come help it. That's all it wants. Somebody help me. Help me, help me, help me. But you get tired of them screaming and screaming, and no matter what you do, you can't help them. What you do is you hold them really tight against you, you rub their back really hard, you walk around with them, because there's no use trying to go to bed. You will not sleep. And I suspect a lot of people that abuse their babies do it because the baby's got colic. It's really sad. But that's the key as a parent, is to focus on the child and the child's feelings and the child's needs, and not your feelings and not your needs. Because what we run into is we get involved in, this kid's not being thoughtful of me. This kid's not being loving. They're not being considerate. They're not treating me right. And I'm going to tell you where it's clearest to see that happen to parents. And you'll see it happen out in the church foyer. And I've learned to step back and stay out of this because parents don't appreciate it when I try to involve myself in this. But there is a developmental stage that children move into.
Oh, you're, okay, I'm sit down.
She doesn't like for me getting into
He's
this.
gonna be out this bed. It's his now favorite stage.
It is my favorite
I
stage.
know.
I just don't want to parent it.
That's
At
right.
all. But I'd like to help other parents do a better job of it. You know how excited you are when your child takes its first step? Or maybe even back up when they roll over the first time. And then they get up and they actually crawl. But they first take a real step, and you got to call people and tell them about it, or you want to video it. Well, there is something that developmentally is every bit as important as that first step, maybe even more so, because what it says about the brain development. And that is around 18 months of age, when your sweet little baby, at some point, thinks it's figured things out, so it looks up at you, and with a great big smile, it says, "No!" And it says it emphatically. And then it giggles, and it waits to see what happens. And most of the time what happens is the parent looks down and says, "You will not tell me no." Or they may even yank it up and swat its bottom. And the poor little one is like, "What did I do wrong?" It works when mama does that. And so they'll cry and they'll get frustrated. They go off and they think about it. And they'll observe for a day or two. And they'll think they figured it out. And so they'll try it again. "No!" And they'll have a different look on their face. Because they'll figure out, oh, I was smiling and I should have been frowning. So they'll try that. "No!" And they get in trouble again. Poor little thing. And so it goes off for a couple of days and it's frustrated and it observes and it's trying to figure out, why is this working for mama and it doesn't work for me? And then it'll try it with a louder voice, or it'll try it angry, and there will be maybe a couple of weeks where the child randomly is coming up with no, and the parent's going nuts. What's wrong with my child? It keeps telling me no. It's the baby. It can't tell me no. And they'll tell that to the baby. And you'll hear them out there in the church foyer say, "You do not tell me no." They're getting ego involved. And probably all of us have been through that. Poor baby. All it's trying to do is be just like its mama and daddy. It's trying to grow up. That is the first sign of true ego development. It is becoming an individual. Up until that point, up until they say no, They really see themselves as an accessory to mama. That's why they have so much trouble when mama's not around, because they're a part of mama. But when they begin that no stage, they are beginning the process of individuation, which they'll usually complete around 16 years of age, but they're beginning to separate themselves. Yeah, other painful things happen at 16.
And actually, you will see this before 16. You will see almost exactly the same behavior he just described at somewhere between, depending on girl or boy, 12 to 14. Because at that 12 to 14, all of a sudden, it's not cute when they say, I'm not going to do that. You can't make me do that. I don't like that. I don't want that. Or totally ignore you.
Or roll their eyes.
Or the sound. Or the sound. Right? Okay. Literally, I had someone bring a guy, a man, bring his son in to my office. I mean, literally sat him down in that chair, and he said, fix him. There is a real problem with him, and he needs some help. I thought, yep, it's called DAD. I said, okay. He is belligerent. He talks back to me. He acts like he's grown. He tells me he's not going to do stuff. Oh. Are you saying he's acting like a 2-year-old? Yes, that's it. He's acting like a 2-year-old. Good. Yeah, good. He's supposed to. Now, he doesn't have to be disrespectful to you. But that very development says he's trying to be his own man. He's doing the same thing, by the way, Dad, you're doing. He's doing his best to exert all authority he has on himself and his environment with the understanding you've given him about grow up. How many times in the last month have you told him to grow up? Well, he needs to. That's what he's trying to do. You just don't like the way it looks. Because you didn't like the way it looked at 2 when he was throwing himself down on the floor throwing a temper tantrum. It's exactly the same thing. It just doesn't look near as cute at that age. And that was the bell.
Oh, well, let me wrap it up then. The important part of these developmental stages is for you as the parent to learn what's normal and to accept it as normal. You may not like it. You're not going to like it. Yeah. But it's normal. They have to go through it. They have to grow out of it. And if it's normal, you do not parent them out of it. That's the number one thing I wished I'd known as a starting out parent. Because probably 3/4 of what I tried to do as a parent was completely wasted effort. Because the kids grew out of what I was trying to train them out of. So I frustrated them. I frustrated me. I felt like a failure. And then after a year or so, it just went away. Because I was trying to make them do something they weren't ready to do, or quit doing something they weren't ready to quit. It's kind of like trying to potty train a 6-week-old, which would be great if you could do it. But you can't do it. You got to wait until they're age appropriate to potty train. So a 13-year-old is going to be disrespectful. Your parenting job is to not put up with it. Don't think they're broke. Don't get ego involved. You will not treat me that way. Rather, that is not appropriate behavior towards a parent. You need to be respectful. You realize I feed you. You realize I clothe you. You realize I put a roof over your head. You probably don't realize that. I don't have to do that. You know, we can put you in the foster system. My son came home in third grade.
These words have to come out of our mouth.
My son came home after a presentation in third grade that the state police had made on how to recognize when you're being abused and what to do about it, and they gave him all a card. And he came in waving that card, showed it at me and said, the next time you spank me, I'm calling this number. Well, I hadn't spanked him since he was 2. I mean, he was one of those kids that did not need to be spanked. You just look at him crossways, and he's crying, and he wants to do different. But he said, I am calling this number, and you're going to be in big trouble. And I explained, well, yeah, and then they'll send out a social worker, and they'll take you away, and they'll put you in a children's home, and you get to be with a bunch of other kids, but you won't have to see us anymore. It's going to be a lot cheaper for us when that happens. He never called that number. So you just tell them the facts of life. Okay, the bell rang. We got to let you go. We get into the fun stuff next week.